Welcome to part 2 on my review of the Dracula movies. After the Universal monster movies in the 1930s and 40s, the movie studio Hammer decided to make their own wave of horror movies during the 1950s. One of their first was Horror of Dracula. What makes this Dracula movie significant is that it's the first Dracula movie to be in color. The plot is about Jonathan Harker, played by John Van Easton, is making a real estate deal with Count Dracula, played by Christopher Lee. But Jonathan discovers that Count Dracula is a vampire. Count Dracula moves to Jonathan's hometown and seeks out Jonathan's fiancée. Horror of Dracula is an interesting and different take on the classic character. It does follow in the footsteps of Bela Lugosi's Dracula movie from 20 years prior, but what makes it different is that it's not afraid to show blood. As Dracula, Christopher Lee did a really good job, although I wasn't a fan of him not really hiding his British accent.
I am Dracula, and I welcome you to my house.
And his fake fangs. He does everything else right. My favorite part is when Dr. Van Helsing fights Count Dracula's castle. I heard that they cut down the content of this fight scene to get it approved, but an uncut version should get video release sometime soon. Overall, it's a solid start to a film series that would last until 1970s. I give Horror of Dracula 3 stars out of 4. A little over 2 decades later, Universal Studios decided that it was time to make a new Dracula movie. In this one, Lucy's character is now Mina's character, and Mina's character is now Lucy's character? If that wasn't mind-boggling enough, the place where they live in is connected to an insane asylum. What kind of idiot does that? Anyway, Dracula comes into the picture by arriving in their town. This Dracula movie makes many mistakes in its changes. It has little to do with the novel, the stage version, or any of the previous movies. It also doesn't help that this movie is mostly boring. Even though all the other Dracula movies took place in the 1800s, this one takes place in 1913. I guess they did that so they can have an excuse to have a car chase scene. It's funny to see Donald Pleasence in this because he fought a different kind of monster a year before. But let's talk about the title character. Frank Langella as Dracula is really forgettable. He doesn't come off as intimidating, scary, or even dark. He's just there to look good for the ladies. Although the John Williams score is decent, this Dracula movie is very bland and easily the worst professionally made Dracula movie that I've ever seen. I give the 1979 version of Dracula 1.5 stars out of 4. Sadly, around this time, there would be many movies that would feature Dracula in them, but they were shameful to say the least. Dracula vs. Billy the Kid, Blackula, and Dracula vs. Frankenstein. All 3 of them. Around this time, a writer named James Van Hart wrote a script called Dracula, The Untold Story. It was shelved for some time until it was going to be made into a TV miniseries. Then, it got even better. A casting agent was showing a rising star some scripts, and that actress turned out to be Winona Ryder. She read the script, loved it, and gave it to her friend Francis Ford Coppola to read. What was going to be a TV miniseries turned into Francis Ford Coppola's next movie, Bram Stoker's Dracula. Not only did this movie acknowledge the fact that Dracula was based off Vlad the Impaler, but it was very close to the book. Jonathan Harker, played by Keanu Reeves, goes over to Transylvania to sign a real estate deal with Dracula, played by Gary Oldman. Dracula sees a picture of Jonathan's fiancée and falls in love with her because she reminds him of his long-dead wife. He goes over to England to feed off the living and to win over Jonathan's fiancée Mina, played by Winona Ryder. Bram Stoker's Dracula may come the closest to all the mainstream Dracula movies when it comes to the book, but it makes some subtle changes. The main thing is a romantic relationship between Dracula and Mina. It was never in the book, but it made the movie a lot better. As I watched this, I believe that these two were in love. For example, when Dracula can turn her into a vampire, he doesn't because he loves her too much to do so. What's nice is that this movie isn't afraid to throw some horror in your face either. It does a fine job of balancing romantic elements and horror elements as well. Dracula makes many forms. He's Vlad the Impaler, an old man, a wolf, a young man, and a bat creature. Gary Oldman said that this movie was his most physically challenging role, and I bet it was. Out of all the other side characters that were well-rounded, Anthony Hopkins did a great job as Dr. Van Helsing. I love how he's kinda kooky, but very smart at the same time. I also love how he delivers bad news.
Was she in great pain?
Yeah, she was in great pain. Then we cut off her head and drove a stake to her heart and burned it, and then she found peace.
Doctor! Please.
It has been noted by many that Keanu Reeves' acting was really bad. Although he was very dry, it's far from coming close to ruining the movie. Another thing worth mentioning is the special effects. During the time where CGI was starting to be used more often, this movie is 100% practical effects. That is a practical effect, and I still believe those fangs are really coming out of his mouth. It's an interesting mix of horror and romance, but undoubtedly amazing. If I ever meet Winona Ryder someday, I would like to personally thank her for making this movie possible. I give Bram Stoker's Dracula 4 stars out of 4. So, stay tuned to the final part where I review Dracula 2000, Van Helsing, and Dracula Untold.
I am Dracula.